Welcome back to the Warehouse Podcast. My name is Jesse. Before we get into the episode, you know the drill. Bet Online is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for everything football, from the preseason NFL to college kicking off. Bet Online is every stat, every matchup, even live odds and spreads while the games are being played. Think you know your stuff? Get in on the winner take all $300,000 NFL Survivor pool for the upcoming season. When the game's over, head on over to the online casino, get in on a game of blackjack or poker, or unwind with one of our over 150 slot games. Head to the website today, use promo code BELIEVE, and get in on the action. Bet online, the game starts here. All right. So the Orioles split a series 2-2 with the Astros. And sort of in honor of Anthony Santander's grand slam that propelled the Orioles to a completely different trajectory in that series, I believe. I think the Orioles got really, really lucky to escape with a 2-2 split. It was fortunate in a lot of ways. And I don't think we would have split had and Santander, grounded into a double play in that situation or whatever. But he didn't, and it was big grand slam for the Orioles. The Orioles are trying to fight and keep some sort of positive vibes and momentum, something resembling momentum. It feels like we are splitting close to every series or coming close to that. But we haven't been swept in a while, so that's a positive. But overall, it's been not great baseball. So sort of in honor of Anthony Santander's Grand Slam, I think a lot of Oriole fans have been thinking about and contemplating his impending free agency at the end of the season, what that sort of means for the Orioles going forward, what chances the Orioles have to re-sign him, and what a potential contract with him would look like. So I'm going to try to get into that in this episode. I do want to make it clear. I think on this show, we're all big Anthony Santander fans. I know Tyler had for a while been advocating trading him, and thought that I guess his basic argument was that he would bring back more value to the team than you know, was worth keeping him. But I think now, to be fair to Tyler, that he has not really talked about that in a long time. Certainly wasn't advocating at the trade deadline or even before this season. But I think prior to maybe 2 years ago, he had been contemplating a potential trade, which would have been interesting. But it never materialized for the Orioles. And now here we are. And he's about to be a free agent. So I'm just gonna kind of go through some potential. So they're not great comparisons, I have to say. There is one that I think is pretty good comparison in terms of contracts that I think may sort of resemble what his looks like in this upcoming off season with some player comparisons. Um, and yeah, so I have a few here, but yeah, we'll see what ends up happening. I'll sort of give what I think he's going to make, and then sort of, analyze what I think the Orioles will be thinking heading into the off season and how committed they are to bringing back Santander in an Orioles uniform. So, the first contract that I was sort of looking at that goes back a while at this point, so its usefulness is in serious question. I will say that. But it was so when we're looking at Anthony Santander, right? Just to sort of preview, right? We're looking at a guy who's going to be making his money through his offensive profile. Now, uh, he does some good things in right field. There's no doubt about that. But the reason a team will be signing Anthony Santander, and the reason that he will have the contract he looks that he will have is because of how he does offensively predominantly. Like 95% will be his offensive profile. And he's so good offensively that he could be a DH on a team, and that would not be a problem. But the fact that he plays right field, at least as of now, at this stage in his career, is a bonus, right? So the first contract that I was sort of looking at was Nelson Cruz in 2015. Now, of course, he played for the Orioles. He played for the Orioles in 2014 before he hit free agency. And at that point, he was heading into his age 34 season. He had uh, yeah, so he really put up. I'm sure a lot of Oriole fans remember he put up a great season with us. He hit 40 home runs, and he had an OPS of 859. So he really had a great offensive season. Nelson Cruz, we all know, sort of the immortal and timeless hitter that yeah, hit well into his 40s, played Major League Baseball into his 40s, which is pretty incredible. And especially for a guy sort of with that just mashes basically, and that was basically what his major contributions to the teams that he played for. So yeah, for the Orioles in 2014, he hit 40 home runs. And at that time, yeah, he was hitting free agency heading into his uh age 34 season, but he had shown that his bat was still alive, not only with the 40 home runs he hit that year, but he had hit 27 and 24 in 2013 and 2012 with the Rangers. So he was definitely like still a very good hitter uh, and still producing at a really high level, despite being 33 when he hit 40 home runs. So at that point in his career, he ended up signing a 4-year deal worth $57 million. So yeah, that's one, but we have to keep in mind this was in 2015. That was 9 years ago at this point. So especially with inflation, everything like that. And Nelson Cruz was 34 at the time. Anthony Santander, he's 29 now. He's going to be 30 next season for he's going to be playing in his age 30 season during the first year of his contract. So there are some major differences between those two contracts. I was just thinking about some other sort of players that sort of resembled uh Santander and sort of where he was at. Now I was thinking a little bit about Jorge Soler, sort of a guy that also just hits a ton of home runs. Now Soler is a guy that strikes out more than Santander does. But heading into his age 32 season in 2023, he had a 3-year deal worth 42 million. And then yeah, we sort of moving down and moving closer and closer to the comparison, I think makes the closest sense to Anthony Santander. We can look at Marcelo Zuna in 2021. Uh, he signed a 4-year, $65 million contract, age 30. And he had done pretty well. Now, the thing with him is that he had a really, really good year in 2020, but that was the COVID year. So he hit 18 home runs in just 60 games, right? So in just a little more than a third of a season, that's certainly on track or on pace for more than 40 home runs. And he had an OPS over 1,000. So in 2020, Marcelo Zuna had a fantastic year, but it was really, really uh, not over the course of an entire season. It was his contract year. I'm sure he did all the things he had to do, as I think a lot of guys probably do, to get themselves in particularly good shape, or, potentially there's just this added, intensity or focus when you're in your contract year. But he had a great contract year, and he ended up getting a 4-year, $65 million contract. So that went really well for him. So, uh, yeah. So, and then sort of coming to the closest comparison I think that we have, or at least I was able to contemplate and figure out and find. Now, one of the big distinctions between Santander and the three guys that I had previously mentioned was all those hitters were right-handed. And this guy, who I think it resembles sort of his offensive profile, is a lefty. And I was thinking about Kyle Schwarber, and Kyle Schwarber is a left-handed hitter, just like well, Santander's switch hitter, but of course gets most of his at bats from the left-handed side. Um, and Kyle Schwarber. Uh, Heading into 2023, he was 29 years old and he got 4 years, $79 million with the Phillies. And if we look at the previous 2 years, again, it's sort of the one big thing that is not really great with these comparisons is that Schwarber had the 2020 COVID year. He had 11 home runs, so you can't really assess that year fully in terms of like with Santander, we can look at his age 27 season, his age 28 season, his age 29 season, and they were full complete seasons, and he did really well in all of them. With Schwarber, you can really just look back at 2021, and he had 32 home runs, and then 2020, just the 11 home runs because of the conditions of COVID and everything like that. So but in 2021, Kyle Schwarber hit 32 bombs, and he also, in addition to that, had a stellar 928 OPS. So that was good enough to get him 4 years, $79 million. He's was roughly going to be the same age. He's a year younger at that point in time than Anthony. At that point in time, when he signed that contract, he was a year younger than Anthony Santander will be when he signs his contract this offseason. So those are just some important considerations. The other big distinction between Schwarber and Santander, Schwarber plays left, Santander plays right, as of now, right field, left field as of now. So yeah, those are some other distinctions. But Anthony Santander, he has really put 3 years in a row together, where in 2022 he hit 33 home runs. In 2023, he hit 28 home runs. So right there, he's basically averaging 30 home runs a season, slightly above. And then in this 2024 season, as we all know, he has really gone off. He's hit 38 home runs, and he is going to, barring injury or barring a real disaster, he is going to eclipse 40 home runs, which 32 and 42 or 44 home runs is a really, really big distinction, uh, in the production. Even though historically, this is by far and away the most power that Santander has demonstrated in a single season. Now, the one thing with Santander that you can say is a little bit of a knock against him, even despite the near 40 home runs, he is a 321, or I'm sorry, not a 321, an 821 OPS. Now he has a good slugging percentage, but his on base percentage is 302. So despite being a guy that has pretty good contact skills, he doesn't strike out a lot. Um, he is someone who he doesn't get on base a lot. And 235 average, 302 on base percentage. So, he definitely compensates for that with the power. But with 38 home runs, you would sort of expect somebody to have an OPS closer to 900 or not at least in the high 800s, and he's not really there. So 821 is very solid and very good. N No real complaints about that, but it does feel like, okay, if you have you're in a season where you're hitting 40 home runs, your OPS should be a little more elevated. But so if I'm sort of thinking about now, Santander has expressed interest in returning to the Orioles. So maybe the Orioles, I'm sure Elias is hoping that there is a bit of a hometown discount because of that. But with that said, and I will say I actually do believe that when Santander says he wants to stay in Baltimore, I actually do believe it. Believe it. The Orioles picked him as a Rule 5 draft. He's been an all-time Oriole in his major league career since his Rule 5 selection. So I'm sure he has a lot of goodwill toward the Orioles. And yeah, and also the Orioles are just very, very good. I think when he was asked about returning to the Orioles, he pointed this out that, they're sort of a team that, is hoping to win a World Series in the next few years. So, especially with that excitement and with that possibility, why would you not want to stay on the Orioles? The only real reason that you might not want to is if you don't get the contract that you're hoping for from the Orioles. So we'll see what happens. And it is very difficult to sort of know exactly where the Orioles' heads are at with Anthony Santander. Now, Ryan O'Hearn is also a free agent at the end of this year. But the thing is, you know, Santander, yeah, so but Santander has just provided, so much power for the Orioles this year. He's been steadily in the cleanup position. Now, the Orioles, if they're thinking about it, right, certain there are other elements that might be higher priority for the Orioles. We've talked on this show about a potential Gunnar Henderson extension, a potential Adley Rutschman extension. Soon, I think the Orioles may be considering a Jackson Holiday extension. I think probably not this off season because he hasn't really he's shown glimpses of doing well in the bigs. But I think they would like to see probably a Gunnar Henderson like season before they give him a big contract extension. Not a Gunnar Henderson like season. I shouldn't say that, but a really, really solid start to finish season for Jackson Holiday. I think that would sort of be a bare minimum sort of requirement before giving someone like Holiday $350 million like in an extension, right? Not that he necessarily has to hit, you know, over a 900 OPS in order for the Orioles to give him an extension. But just all that to say, the Orioles have a lot of young players that they might be trying to lock up for a long time. And Anthony Santander, it's possible, is not one of the Orioles' top priorities, right? I think Gunnar Henderson, I think most Oriole fans think that Gunnar Henderson should be a top priority for providing an extension to. And there's a lot of reason to think and believe that the Orioles should be doing that, should be giving him a contract that resembles uh uh Julio Rodriguez's, right? Or somebody to that effect. Just a young star who is really already put up monstrous numbers, he probably is out of the contention for this now, but at one time was probably in contention uh for winning the MVP award in the American League. So he might not be fully out of contention. He still has a very, very solid OPS, he's a shortstop. So that he has factors that are in his favor, but his power's really dropped off recently. So not to make this about Gunnar Henderson, but the Orioles do have probably other priorities that they have to think about and explore, and it is a little curious. Okay, are the Orioles going to how much does Michael Ice really have full control? Does he have an unlimited budget? What his budget is not clear to us, right? So if the Orioles are operating with some sort of budget and we're thinking about extensions, right? I mean, it we have so many guys that could be eligible for extensions right around the corner now. Uh, I mean, we mentioned Jackson Holiday. Gunnar Henderson has already established himself as like a big extension candidate. You could look at Adley Rutschman as an extension candidate. I think he's probably not nearly as high a priority, at least in my mind, as Gunnar Henderson is. But Adley Rutschman is, a possible extension candidate. And then you think about guys like Kobe Mayo potentially being extension candidate, not immediately, not this offseason, but you think about Basayo, right? If he comes up and he takes the league by storm, right? Is he now eligible? Are the Orioles now thinking about him? Now, the Orioles have to, even though not all of them will be extensions this offseason, that sort of all those sort of looming questions have to be accounted for when the Orioles think about budgeting. So are the Orioles, especially with the emphasis that Mike Elias places on young talent, drafting well, sort of capitalizing on uh the years when players are cheaper and inexpensive, are they going to give someone like Anthony Santander, who is really good, is a really good hitter, but probably has tools that don't age as well? Are we going to get into a long 4 or 5 year commitment with a guy when we don't know potentially what the ending years of his contract will look like regarding his offensive production? You're probably paying for two, probably 3 good years of Anthony Santander, and then it's a little up in the air. Who knows? I mean, maybe now I doubt it, but there are guys that sort of have that can hit later into their career, maybe not to the extent that Nelson Cruz can, but guys that can hit at age 36. Marcelo Zuna is a good example of this, right? So there are guys that still find a way to mash even at higher ages, right? But with that said, what risk is involved, and is the risk worth it to the Orioles, who are getting younger, are getting more exciting, have outfield prospects on the way? A Santander extension might create a situation with a crowded outfield, right? I mean, we think about Bradfield in the minors, we think about Colton Cowser occupying an outfield position. So it's not to say that there will be no room for Anthony Santander in the outfield. They can definitely make space for him. But it's just, and like I said earlier, he can DH if necessary. But how it sort of comes down to a question of how frugal do the Orioles want to be in order to try to uh, preserve money and potentially redirect the money that would be required to re-sign Santander into other outlets, potentially extensions of younger players, or even just bolstering pitching or whatever other objectives they decide to do. The Orioles could also go a route where they try to replace Anthony Santander for the next couple years with somebody else in right field, let Santander go, and then end up just getting somebody else to sort of have a 2 year deal for the next couple years rather than a longer term contract, uh, uh, which Santander probably will be expecting because he just had, among the best years of his career, hit the most home runs that he has hit in his career. So he's going to want to like capitalize off this for the long term and not sign a 2 year deal where that puts him in a couple years trying to find another. He's going to be older at that point, and et cetera. So Santander is definitely probably going to end up with a 4 or 5 year contract. So with all that said, what I would think a Santander contract would look like. If especially we're keeping in mind the Schwarber 4 year 79 million. I would think somewhere for Santander is going to be like 5 years 95 million, somewhere around that range. I sort of highlighted a little bit why but the main reasons why I think he'll do a little bit better than Schwarber is just because, unfortunately for Schwarber, just the timing. As I said, Santander demonstrated that he had this track record of the last 3 years being a consistent power threat in the Orioles lineup, hitting 33, 28, and 38 home runs 3 years in a go, 3 years in a row. He hasn't had any significant health issues that stopped him from being able to do that or put up those solid numbers. Yeah, he's really demonstrated that that sort of consistency as a hitter, which has been really, really good to see. And I think that will make teams more trusting and feel like, okay, we feel comfortable spending some money to get this bat. So I could see him taking a 4 year deal, but I think it'll definitely be a 4 or 5 year deal, and I think it'll be yeah, my guess would be like 5 years, 95 million, if I'm putting it at a straight number. So yeah, so and yeah, we as Oriole fans don't have a lot of precedent for this. The Orioles have signed a few contracts under Mike Elias and David Rubenstein's regimes. But we don't really have precedent for how the Orioles handle a situation like this with Anthony Santander. Are they going to be willing to uh, give him the money that he deserves in order to bring back an Oriole who has been an Oriole for his entire career? Um, how are Elias? I mean, I have no doubt that they think he would be a valuable contributor, and he would have a valuable role on the team. I have no doubt about that. But it's just how do they want to invest the resources that would be required in order to uh, bring Santander back in the orange and black? So yeah, so we'll see. I think the other consideration is that, I mean, and I sort of talked about something related to this with when I was talking about the Orioles potentially trading Kerstad at the deadline. I think I got into that conversation. But basically, yeah, if we're looking at the Orioles are second in Major League Baseball right now, with 199 home runs. The Yankees lead the Major League Baseball with 206, and the Orioles are 20 ahead of the third place team, the Los Angeles Dodgers. So it's 206, 199, which is where the Orioles are, and then 179. And if I'm looking at this, right, let's just say the Orioles don't bring back Santander and we end up getting another, whoever replaced him ends up hitting 20 home runs over the course of the season, right? Now, we're not all the way through the season, so, whatever. But let's say Santander was putting up half the production, um, the home run production. Uh, how much would the Orioles suffer uh relative to their total home run numbers? And the Orioles, even if the Orioles had hit well, so Santander has 38 home runs, I think, at the moment. Uh yeah, 38 home runs. So, we'll just say, so if he had had uh, let's say he had 18 home runs at this point in the season rather than 38, right? He was just sort of some combination of other guys we had in the outfield and whoever the Orioles potentially signed. The Orioles, if we had 20 less home runs than we currently have, would be tied with the Dodgers. So the Orioles, like Santander, is obviously adding a lot just individually to him, to the power production on this baseball team. But it's not like the Orioles would fall even to fifth, right? If Santander was sort of replaced with a more average level. So the Orioles have all that to say the Orioles sort of have a surplus in the power department, in the home run department. So there's a real possibility that the Orioles don't feel like they need to really invest in the power. Now, it sort of depends, right? Because like you can also think about it as like you think about what the Rangers did last year in the playoffs. You could think about, let's say Anthony Santander has a really good postseason and is a valuable contributor to the postseason. The Orioles could think, okay, even just like having him in the playoffs as well is a huge positive and bonus. You know, you think about like the Phillies lineup that has Harper, that has Schwarber, right? And how just dangerous and lethal that those combinations are in the playoffs. So you think about how the Orioles could construct something similar with someone like Anthony Santander, right? You also just have to think about the presence that Santander has in the lineup and how that impacts the other guys. So Santander is normally protecting whether it be Henderson, whether it be Rutschman, he's protecting somebody, right? So and especially at this stage in the season, most of the pitchers are going to want to pitch to the guy in front of Santander. So his presence also has ripple effects. So the Orioles, I don't think really will make the decision to just let him go and then not replace him with anything. The Orioles have to find some replacement. But especially with O'Hearn leaving too, or probably not re-signing with the Orioles. I mean, we'll see what happens. Maybe he will. But the Orioles will have to find some replacement for Santander. The Orioles can't just go into next season without Santander and just try to work it out. Like that's not a reasonable strategy, especially for a team that's trying to win a World Series. But how the Orioles proceed, whether they try to find a cheaper option, you know, who knows? Now, I will say, I think with David Rubenstein taking the team over, I do think there should be uh sort of part of the thing that he, you know, part of his appeal to the fans was he sort of indicated like, hey, I'm willing to spend money, right? He didn't say like I'm really rich, but he is really like rich is in even, he's wealthy, right? He rich is not even a fair assessment of his financial status, I guess. But he's like extremely wealthy. He's a billionaire, right? So you know, the Orioles really in an ideal situation, right? We would like it to be where he sort of treats the team like Steve Cohen treats the Mets, right? And is willing to spend money and isn't really concerned with how much it is as long as it's improving the team, making the team better. And I think it's pretty undeniable that re-signing Santander to a contract would make the team better. Now, would it be the most financially, the absolute most bang for your buck, cheapest way to sort of get the most wins per dollar? No, he probably wouldn't be. But the Orioles, we know that Mike Elias was very concerned about that, sort of at the beginning of his time with the Orioles, but with Rubenstein buying the team, that should be much less of a concern theoretically. So we're going to see how the Orioles treat that. It would be great to have Santander back with the Orioles next year. But it is up in the air. We will see. But yeah, I wanted to do this episode because he had a big, massive grand slam for the Orioles that, as I said, really changed the outcome, I think, of that Houston series. And yeah, so big props to Santander. I really do love him. Also just big shout out to him because he's the longest tenured Oriole. I am pretty sure he's the longest tenured Oriole. So he's been around for a while. And yeah, I mean, I definitely want to see him back with the Orioles, but I also want him to have a contract that is fitting to his value. And I don't want him to take a massive pay cut just to be with the Orioles. Like, I would like him to be able to make the money that he quote unquote deserves for his value. So, in any case. But yeah, we will revisit this definitely when the off season comes up. At that time, we'll have a full season to be able to look at how he did this year by the season's end. He's at 38 home runs. He's bound to hit 40, which I mean, I think Tyler has said on the show, it's just an even number. Is there a big difference between 39 and 40 home runs? No, but 40 just feels really, really nice. So, but yeah, he'll probably hit 40. He might hit 45, but he'll probably hit at least a few more over 40. So, in any case, yeah, not having the power production of Aaron Judge this year, unfortunately, but still great player nonetheless, and we are hopeful to have him back next year. So, all right. Thank you so much for listening. Feel free to follow the show, give us a 5-star rating and review. We have a YouTube channel, The Warehouse Podcast. Feel free to subscribe to us on YouTube. After you subscribe and you watch our videos on YouTube, feel free to comment with any thoughts on the show. If you want to get in touch with the show, feel free to email us at thewarehousepod@gmail.com. Feel free to follow us on Instagram and on Twitter at the Warehouse Pod. Eli is back in the United States, back in Florida, and will be, I assume, resuming his Twitter responsibilities over there. So yeah, thanks again to the sponsor of this episode. This has been the Warehouse Podcast. My name is Jesse, and go O's.